All right, we begin with officials of the striking Kenyan doctors got yet another reprieve today and will not be going to jail just yet. The Employment and Labor Relations Court postponed the determination of their sentencing until Friday, when Justice Helen Wasilwa is expected to make her final verdict. The 7 who were facing arrest had filed an appeal against their sentencing, even as the strike entered its 58th day today. Here's Timothy Otieno with that report.
It was a day that began in a style that has by now become predictable. For the third time in less than 3 weeks, the 7 representatives of the striking doctors appeared before Justice Helen Wasilwa.
Number 5 is hereby.
But the judge postponed yet again the commencement of the jail term for the union officials, choosing to instead listen to their submissions regarding their appeal.
They have used abusive language in the media, in the open glare of the media. They have even demonstrated, my lady, a lack of appreciation of their responsibility as leaders of the union, and have accused their members of holding them at ransom.
The Cabinet Secretary Health, Cabinet Secretary Social Services, and this order are sitting pretty. And the doctors, my lady, are out in the streets blowing whistles, and these ones are preparing to go to jail. It's not fair.
I will therefore render a ruling on the 3rd of January, that is Friday, 3rd of February. 3rd February, that will be on Friday this week. And in the meantime, I'll still suspend the sentence to that date.
The 72-hour reprieve for the union officials met with an ever-defiant doctors' organization who insist jailing their leaders will only add them impetus to agitate for what they believe is rightfully theirs.
We are both happy and sad. I'll start from the sad news. The sad news is the Kenyan public, the Kenyan Wajiko whom we are fighting for, gets to suffer the consequences of a prolonged industrial dispute without access to doctors. Happy in the sense that, one, at least our leaders are not in jail. That is a fact. But number 2, at least we get an opportunity to present ourselves before the Court of Appeal, where we can put the matters in front of the court.
The union will continue to engage the relevant stakeholders or parties concerned to try and reach a solution even before then, because we will use whatever window we have, we'll utilize whatever opportunities we have to try and resolve the matter.
The group would then make its way from the Milimani Law Courts to Haile Selassie Avenue and then Harambe Avenue, and later presented a petition to Parliament seeking to have the August House intervene in the matter. Ugunja Member of Parliament Opiyo Wandanyi received the petition, which outlines various aspects of the talks that are yet to yield desired results. KTN News has established that the doctors are considering a proposal to use the salary structure by the Salaries and Remuneration Commission released in November that would have the lowest paid medical doctor receive 81,148 shillings in basic pay. Sources close to the negotiations reveal that all other non-monetary aspects of the collective bargaining agreement have been agreed on in principle, even as the 3-day window period before the court verdict is announced slowly lapses. Timothy Otieno, KTN News.
A United States attorney in Manhattan has confirmed that 2 Kenyans, Baktash Akasha and Ibrahim Akasha Abdallah, a Pakistani Hussein Ghulam and an Indian Vicky Goswami have arrived in New York to face charges of drug trafficking. The Manhattan U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara announced that the 4 were extradited to the U.S. after being arrested in Mombasa on the request of the U.S. government. They will be charged with trafficking in massive quantities of heroin and methamphetamine. This confirmation comes even as Kenyan police kept denying any involvement in the extradition of the four. And as KTN News reporter Francis Ontamwana tells us from Mombasa, the announcement ironically arrived after a court in Mombasa had ordered the CID director and the Inspector General of Police to explain the whereabouts of the four suspects.
The last time the four were publicly seen was on the 13th of January this year at the Mombasa law courts. The two Akasha sons and their partners, an Indian and a Pakistani, were appearing in court over a gun altercation drama. Several days later, the four facing drug trafficking offenses in the U.S. disappeared when the extradition case came up Monday. Now, sources say the four suspects were flown to the U.S. aboard a U.S. chartered plane to face charges related to drug trafficking. Lawyer Cliff Ombeta, representing the four, seems worked up.
What happens to the families of these suspects? They have been camping here in court throughout. They have been crying. They have been harassed. They have been beaten. What happens to them? Somebody has to be answerable. We can't allow Americans to come into our country, walk in roughshod, take our people, bully everybody, and then our police keep quiet, our judiciary keeps quiet. We can't allow this.
The lawyer's petition to have the state produce the four hit a snag on Monday, and right now he thinks there is something fishy going on.
The officer who confronted me on Saturday in the morning threatened me. He told me he can blow me off. He told me he's not going to talk to me again. He cocked his gun and put it to my head. That is a threat. That is not even a threat. That is a perfect threat.
Senior detectives from the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency and Kenya's Anti-Narcotic Agency were said to have been involved in the operation. Emotions overwhelmed the mother of the Akashas at the court as she recounted the last moments with her kin. She claims officers ransacked their home at the weekend and now she fears for the worst.
Wakapanda juu, wakazunguka rumu zote paka choni, kila pale kuacha paka store, kufanya check-in. Wametafuta kila pahali na wametoka kupata chochote na nyumba yangu.
Speaking to KTN News on phone, police spokesperson Charles Owino remained non-committal on the said extradition. Owino said procedures of extradition purely lie with the Department of Immigration, saying their mandate ends at executing warrants of arrest. The chronicles of the Akasha family and their involvement in high-powered drug trafficking claims span through several decades. The senior Akasha, the late Ibrahim Akasha Abdallah, was murdered some 17 years ago in Amsterdam, Netherlands by the bullet on drug connections. Up to date, it is not known who ordered the senior Akasha's murder. Francis Ontomwa, KTN News, Mombasa.
In politics now, and the National Super Alliance, NASA, has unveiled a 12-member committee to deliberate on who will be the outfit's presidential flag bearer. The management committee will be supported by a separate technical and strategy team. Murimi Mwangi now interrogates the intrigues surrounding this decision as NASA prepares for its first public rally in Bomet on Saturday.
In a last bid to break the deadlock over who should fly the presidential flag for the recently launched National Super Alliance, the four NASA principals, ODM's Raila Odinga, Wiper's Kalonzo Musyoka, Fort Kenya's Moses Wetangula, and ANC's Musalia Mudavadi, finally deflected the heat over the presidential candidature to a 12-member management committee, comprising 3 representatives from each of the 4 NASA founding parties.
They will start work immediately and make proposals which will be ratified by the leadership of the coalition.
We promise the country that our team is taking Jubilee home. For Kenya to stand, Jubilee must fall.
For his misrule and abdication of responsibility and collusion, runaway corruption, and building state of Kenya's economy.
CIS Senator James Orengo leads the ODM team, while former Deputy Speaker Farah Maalim heads the Wiper team, as Kakamega Senator Boni Halwale leads the Fort Kenya team. Musalia Mudavadi's ANC party picked deputy party leader Kipruto Kirwa and Nambale MP Sakwa Bunyasi, with a promise to name the third member of the team. The principals also announced the formation of a technical and strategy team to facilitate operations of the management committee.
We are pleased to announce today the formation of an expanded outfit that will reach the broad masses of the people everywhere within our land.
Our first public function is going to be a public rally in Bomet town, Bomet County, as guest of the governor of Bomet, Honorable Isaac Ruto, on Saturday, the 4th of February.
With the easier job of setting up the strategy team already out of the way, the harder task of picking the presidential candidate has officially begun, as the spotlight now turns to the 12-member committee, whose verdict could make or break the country's most formidable opposition outfit, NASA. Muremi Mwangi, KTN News in Nairobi.
Concerted efforts are now geared towards settling on a pair to front the NASA race to State House. But what would it mean for Raila Odinga and Kalonzo Musyoka to be the candidates again this year? Or would NASA be better off with Musalia Mudavadi as the NASA presidential candidate? KTN News political affairs editor now takes a look at the possible candidates and what chances each pair would have.
In 2013, the combination of ODM leader Raila Odinga and his Wiper Party counterpart Kalonzo Musyoka lost to President Uhuru Kenyatta and Deputy President William Ruto. What would be their chances were the former Prime Minister to take a fourth stab at the presidency?
The issue would be how to exact that ticket. So roping in Mudavadi within that ticket may exact the ticket itself, because left to their own devices as they ran last election, then nothing much may change from the arithmetic.
Political commentators have even suggested that the ODM leader should shelve his political ambitions and let Amani National Coalition leader Musalia Mudavadi lead the opposition, with Kalonzo Musyoka as the running mate.
The likability of Mudavadi and Kalonzo's, also calm nature, and also the fact that they'll be representing two different regions, itself may stir up impressively
what the opposition sympathizers are basically saying. And I think they are going to commandeer these leaders that what we want is unity. As of who shall run the flag bearer, sort us out in terms of your unity first.
Analysts believe that a ticket comprising the two former vice presidents would provide some excitement in the opposition's bid to dislodge Jubilee from power. Would it be the same with Kalonzo Musyoka as the candidate and Mudavadi as the running mates?
Kalonzo Musyoka, while he's good, he does not have, the gusto in him to lead a ticket of the entire NASA team to a victory.
The entry of Mudavadi on the opposition stage in NASA, his brainchild, may have complicated things for the Senate Minority Leader and Ford Kenya leader Moses Wetangula. Many see his presidential ambitions as being premature.
Wetangula cannot rally up the coastal region. Wetangula cannot rally the northeastern region. Wetangula cannot rally the eastern region.
However, political analyst Adam Zolo believes that the faces on the ticket will not matter too much.
All of them have already endorsed their respective party leaders as their presidential candidates. Yet you see the populace that support the opposition are like, no, we still need something else, something bigger.
The National Super Alliance moves down to Bomet this weekend for the first joint political rally. And a grueling battle for the presidential ticket is set to ensue in coming weeks. All aspirants expected to play hardball. And as the opposition leaders continue to keep their cards very close to their chests, key questions are there for Jubilee to answer in order to stay in the political poker game. Will NASA surprise them with a new pairing on the presidential ticket, or will it be a rematch between President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga? Ben Kitili, KTN News, Nairobi.
And that story by Ben Kitili brings us to our big Q tonight. We're asking you whether you think the use of a committee for the National Super Alliance is the best method to settle on a presidential candidate. Is that the best way to find a presidential candidate, through a committee? Tweet us your views at KTN News, at KTN Kenya, or you can tweet me directly at Sophia Wanuna. In other news, over 1.5 million people listed as voters in the first 2 weeks of the voter registration exercise, even as IEBC rushes against time to meet its target of 6 million voters. And in a bid to meet this, IEBC now says it is putting in place measures to ensure that prisoners and college students register as voters. And even as the process continues, the Commission is worried about voter apathy in certain regions of the country.
188 days to the 2017 August general election, and the IEBC is taking stock. And so far, over 1.5 million people have been listed as voters in the upcoming election.
This represents 25% of the upper target of 6 million voters and 38.50% of the lower limit target of 4 million.
Kajiado, Mandera, Kirinyaga, Kiambu, Muranga, Narok, Nakuru and Garissa are among the counties that recorded the highest number of listed voters in week 2 of the process. But even as it takes stock, the IEBC is faced with an imminent voter apathy in several regions. Vihiga, Nyeri and Siaya recorded some of the lowest numbers.
We are concerned that some counties with the highest potential voting population of 100,000 and more are below 20% of their total target. These counties include Vihiga, Nyeri, Kisii, Kericho, Kakamega, Bungoma, Siaya and Kitui.
If you're going to transfer because you're being influenced, it's not your free choice, you are likely going to disenfranchise yourself.
The IEBC is hoping to list a total of over 6 million new voters during the month-long exercise. With a country that has 9 million people with identity cards who are yet to register as voters, the Commission is hopeful that it will not only meet but exceed the target. The Commission is considering to introduce mobile voter registration for students, pastoralists and prisoners in the hope of achieving its target.
This will run for a period of 7 days that's the registration of students will run for a period of 7 days from 8th to 14th February 2017.
However, prisoners will only get the chance to vote for one post.
Prisoners will be allowed to vote only for the presidential seat or candidates.
The recent plea by pastoralists to be allowed to change polling stations as they keep moving in search of water and pasture for their livestock granted, but with a caveat.
The Commission resolved to allow registration officers in the affected counties to avail registration services within the electoral areas. However, the movement of the BVR kits shall still be confined within the constituency.
The mass voter registration exercise ends on February 14th. In efforts to ensure more Kenyans register as voters, President Uhuru Kenyatta ordered the National Registration Bureau to ensure that identity cards are delivered within 3 days. Linda Ogutu, KTN News.
Now, whereas Kenya had lobbied every country in Africa except 3 states only, Chad eventually upstaged Kenya in the race for African Union Commission chairperson. How did Kenya lose? And more importantly, what is the impact of the election outcome on Kenya's relations with Uganda and other neighbors? Here's Duncan Haemba with some perspectives.
After running what could possibly be a very extensive and expensive campaign for her candidate Amina Chawahiri Mohamed, Kenya was handed a dramatic loss in the race for African Union Commission chair. CS Amina Mohamed has finally spoken her mind, terming the voting process as painful and unfortunate.
It's sad that Africa is divided along language lines, and yet those languages do not belong to us, and the owners of those languages do not fight amongst themselves, right? I don't remember a time when the UK and France were fighting over their languages. They've left that fight on this continent. And I think that's one of the things that really needs to be urgently addressed. Because if it's not, it will continue to divide the continent. And for as long as we are divided, Pan-Africanism is dead.
Chad candidate Musa Faki Mahamat might have sailed to victory after Kenya suffered betrayal from her neighbors in Eastern Africa bloc. Allies like Uganda, Burundi threw their much-needed support elsewhere.
4 countries in East Africa did not side with Kenya. And I think it's because of Djibouti had a good reason. They said the deputy was from Djibouti. And if Amina won, then there was no way the deputy can come from the same region for them. But the rest, I think, Kenya, I think, is faced with the one problem within her neighbors.
Then Morocco's entry into the picture also complicated matters. Kenya and Sahrawi states had opposed its request to be allowed to join the AU.
The admission of Morocco, which again played a different role. Morocco, for the first time, after being out of the AU over 20 years, were back with full swing. And they carried the agenda and the flag of the Francophone. So in fact, in this election, the Francophone won. You see, of the candidates who won, mainly they're from the Francophone nation. But it's very, very sad that Kenya was coming with a reform agenda. Amina represented Pan-Africanism.
Uganda is reported to have only voted for Kenya's candidate in the first round. Burundi and Djibouti also sided with her competition, making it difficult for CS Amina to catch up to her Chadian competitor, Musa Faki Mahamat.
Drawn good lessons, very, very good lessons, and that appearances are deceptive. I think we're very honest people, so it's difficult to deal with deceptive people. So I think going forward, it's a good lesson to learn.
When it became a two-horse race between Kenya's Amina and Chad's Mahamat, the numbers quickly shifted towards the Francophone wing. When SADC's candidate Botswana's Pelonomi Venson Moitoi was edged out in early stages, the SADC bloc sided with Amina until the last round, when the SADC bloc of 15 countries abstained, deciding not to vote in the final round as a show of solidarity since Kenya's Amina Mohamed had been eliminated. The dust has settled, but the shockwaves continue to be felt. Shockwaves of an election that paints a picture of a divided continent. 15 English-speaking countries abstaining from the final vote after Kenya was eliminated, while on the other hand, French-speaking countries ganged together to ensure they hand a defeat a candidate from an English-speaking country. But perhaps closer home, it will be interesting to see the realignments, particularly in the East African Community bloc. Duncan Hemba, KTN in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
KTN Prime, let's now talk business. And unpredictable external shocks like uncertainty over U.S. economic policy, also known as the Trump effect, leaves a cloud hanging over the global macro environment, I beg your pardon. This notwithstanding, the Central Bank of Kenya expects a 5.7% growth in GDP this year, largely pegged on macroeconomic stability, adequate reserves, private sector investment and consumption, as well as government infrastructure investment. Joy Doreen Bera has more.
Within the span of just 1 month, the Nairobi Securities Exchange has bowed to market pressures and shed a further 211 points below the 3,000 psychological mark. Tuesday's close of trading of the NSE 20-share index stood at 2,794.27 points.
Our current dip is not really driven by fundamentals, so it's actually a massive opportunity. That you have an opportunity to be exposed to significant discounts. And when you look at the global attention on Kenya, the position we have on the continent, the fact that we are outperforming the rest of the continent, means the counters can only go up.
According to analysts, the decline in the index is worrying and paints a dim picture of investor fortunes. On the contrary view, NSE's CEO Geoffrey Odundo holds this is merely a short-term trend.
This is a time to discover opportunity, as we say in our rallying call. And I'd like to encourage Kenyans to take advantage of this market because they will continuously improve.
The reduced trading at the bourse carries over from 2016 when the market was in general decline. With Kenya set to go to the polls in August, investors have remained cautious. According to Odundo, Kenya continues to enjoy a stable macroeconomic environment and investor sentiment is expected to bounce back.
Our country is still on a very good growth path. I think the fundamentals in our economy are very good. Looking at even the diversified nature of our very economy, we are sort of insulated from a number of factors affecting other countries.
The 20-share index is a barometer that captures the performance of the top 20 companies listed at the exchange, and it measures them on an index that usually oscillates at 3,000 points on average. Abiagina, KTN Business.
Of course, a beginner for us there, not Joydorin Beras was earlier indicated. Now, the dismal performance of stocks at the Nairobi Securities Exchange has come under sharp focus after investors lost about 150 billion shillings in the last 1 month as markets remained jittery. The NSE 20-share index is down by at least 21%. NSE CEO Geoffrey Odundo maintains these developments were cyclical and are set to trigger major buys as investors take a long-term view of the bourse. Here is more. All right, I understand we'll have that report a little bit later. So let's move to Kenya's rate of inflation rose to 6.99% year-on-year in January 2017, up from 6.35% in December, mainly on the back of an increase in the price of foodstuff and notable increase in the e-cost of education. Now, the food and non-alcoholic drinks index increased by 1.66%. This was mainly attributed to increases in prices of cabbages, spinach, sukuma wiki, maize flour, wheat flour and maize grain, which were partly contributed by prevailing drought conditions. The year-on-year food inflation stood at 12.54% in January 2017. Over the same period, housing, water, electricity, gas and other fuels index increased by 0.33%. Now, this was partly due to increases in cost of electricity, house rents and charcoal, which outweighed price decreases in the cost of cooking gas and kerosene. Despite a notable decrease in the cost of diesel, the transport index increased by 0.6% in January 2017 compared to December 2016. Now, similarly, the education cost index recorded a month-to-month inflation rate of 2.28% within the same period. In a bid to capture young investors, the Nairobi Securities Exchange has launched the 2017 NSE Investment Challenge. The challenge seeks to give investors a platform to trade and better understand the workings of the bourse. Speaking during the launch, NSE's CEO Geoffrey Odundo noted that the investment challenge will be critical in stimulating interest in shares in the country at the time the NSE performance remains volatile. Echoing his sentiments, Paul Mudhaura, the CEO of the Capital Markets Authority, underscored the fact that investor awareness was lacking in the market and the challenge was a step in the right direction. The challenge will see about 65,000 university students take part in the country. The NSE Challenge is an education initiative which was started by Nairobi Securities Exchange in 2008.
For only 200 shillings to access a platform where you can learn. And really, the benefit of this is the engagement and the peer-to-peer discussions. We see this happening on the social side, but that's now taking into a formal and almost real trading environment.
And in our view, the most effective way to protect an investor is to inform an investor, so that in whatever decisions they're making, they're able to reference the right information, they're able to ask the right questions to the right bodies at the right time. Right,
let's retake that story we had for you earlier. And The unpredictable external shocks like uncertainty over U.S. economic policy, also known as the Trump effect, leaves a cloud hanging over the global macro environment. Now, this notwithstanding, the Central Bank of Kenya expects a 5.7% growth in GDP this year, largely pegged on macroeconomic stability, adequate reserves, private sector investment and consumption, as well as government infrastructure investment. Here now is Joy Doreen Bira with that report. Is the one we ran earlier, of course, was the NSC performance that Abi Agina had for us.
Kenya's latest remittances from the diaspora to the end of December 2016 stood at $160 million, an amount that could take a downward trend should some Kenyans living in the U.S. return home. Since November 2016, global markets have been very cautious, some adopting the wait-and-see approach due to the increased volatility arising from an unpredictable U.S. economic policy under Trump's administration.
My point is we are in a regime now that, at a time when we cannot predict. It's really the age of uncertainty. And I think that's why that is the most problematic.
While Brexit is also one of the external concerns, President Trump's administrative decisions pose a greater risk as his America First narrative could affect Kenya's exports to the United States.
5.3% of our exports go to the U.S. Okay? And these are under the AGOA initiative. 93% of that number is apparel, clothing. Right? So just think what would happen.
A stable macro environment means Kenya won't have to dig into its forex reserves that currently stand at close to $7 billion, the equivalent of 4.5 months import cover, to minimize volatility. With political temperatures at fever pitch and an election coming up on August 8th of 2017, the Central Bank of Kenya is less worried about this, but more about the external shocks.
This is the time to do elections. Well, we do it, we move on. But in terms of economic policies, I think there is alignment as to that continuity of economic policies.
The Trump effect aside, inward-looking dry weather conditions are likely to push inflation numbers further up in coming months, with rates shooting up from 6.3% in December of 2016 to 6.99% in January of 2017. Joy Doreen Bira, KTN News.
Now, despite the rise in the number of passengers and aircraft, the amount of cargo handled in airports across Africa dropped from 309,000 to 255,000 tons over 2016. The drop was occasioned by new restrictive regulations in the European countries on the quality of products reaching their markets. Now, this emerged during the ongoing COMESA Airspace Integration Workshop and attended by 13 of the 19 member states. The aviation sector has been growing at an average rate of 5% annually, with the number of passengers on a gradual rise. According to statistics from the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, passenger movement rose from 8.8 million to 9.4 million between 2012 and 2016. And in the same period, aircraft movements increased by 5% from 366,000 to 22,504, I beg your pardon, with aircraft registration rising by 19.1%. Welcome back. Let's now talk sports. And World Boxing Council super bantamweight champion Fatuma Zarika is seeking to defend her title at home in March when she faces Jamaica's Alicia Ashley. Zarika, who is the first Kenyan to hold a WBC title, is urging Kenyans to help her put up the fight here in Nairobi. Robinson Okenya spoke to her and filed this report.
28 victories, 60 knockouts, 2 draws and 11 losses. Fatuma Zarika is an household name when it comes to Kenyan boxing. And recently, she won the WBC Super Bantamweight title. And we are here to talk to her about her recent achievement and what she feels about that. Fatuma, kushinda WBC title, how did it feel?
Vile nilishinda WBC title, nilifeel poa na nilijisikia ya kwamba kama mimi ni mtu new. Juu kwa maisha yangu hiyo ndio ilikuwa tarajio langu kubwa sana kuwini WBC.
For 15 years, Fatuma Zarika has been flying Kenya's flag high in women's boxing, and her achievement last year saw her become the first Kenyan to hold the WBC title after defeating Jamaica's Alicia Ashley. Despite her exploits in the ring, the world #1 super bantamweight boxer says that her road to the top has not been short of challenges.
Nimetembea inchi mob sana ambapo nimekuwa nikilaliwa fight na win, but wananiambia nimelose, so hiyo ndio ilikuwa challenge kubwa sana. Alafu kiangalia pia kuna zile fight zenye ambapo zilikuwa ni ngumu kwangu, ambapo niko weight ya chini na yule msea kwa weight ya juu, so ilikuwa pia ni challenge kwangu. Saa zingine nacheza fight na silipwi juu kiangalia hata WBC hawakunilipa, but hiyo haikuniluzisha moyo.
Zarika says she does not feel appreciated at home despite the glory she has brought the country.
Tangu nikuje sijaona mtu yoyote ambapo ama nikapata simu ya mtu yoyote kusema ya kwamba Zarika kuko hivi na hivi, ama unafaa kuenda kuona mkubwa mali fulani, vitu kama hizo, ama uone president, vitu kama hizo. Juu mimi nimeshinda WBC, nimeileta Kenya, na mimi ndio mtu wa kwanza kuileta WBC Kenya. So I think hata mimi ningependa kuchukuliwa kama wale watu wengine ambapo wanashinda gold wakileta hapa Kenya.
Zarika feels that boxing in Kenya does not pay and that Kenya has been left back in developing the sport.
Huku Kenya kusema kweli boxing hailipi. Na kitu ambapo tuna nio sana kwa boxing juu hatuna sponsorship, hatuna promoters wazuri, unaona.
The boxer who is a sister to Gor Mahia's defender Musa Mohammed is set to defend her title in March, and she is appealing to well wishers to help her set up the fight in Nairobi.
Kitu ambapo naomba wa Kenya tukue na umoja, tushirikiane, na kama kuna sponsor at least tuweze kusaidiana. Yangu mimi nitafanya kazi yangu vile nafanya, kwa jimu sitakosa, na title tuiweke nyumbani, at least tujivunie sisi kama wa Kenya.
Fatuma Zarika's first fight will be a non-title fight in February before she begins preparation to defend her title in March. Robinson Okenye, KTN.